Working the night shift as a cop sucks for a million reasons. The main one is the creepiness of tonight. It might sound childish to say it like that. And sure, I'm not some scrawny guy. But there's something about being stuck in a car with no one around that feels almost alien. I bet it'd be easier if I lived somewhere with fewer trees like the wide open plains of Wyoming. But where I am now, if there's a light anywhere near me, I can barely spot it through the thick canopy most nights. There's nothing to do but sit there in silence. I usually pass the time by watching a show I'm into or finishing a book, just in case a call comes in. When it does, it's always something minor, like a welfare check or some shady character lurking outside a bar. I'm happy to take those calls though, because they pull me back into populated areas instead of leaving me on some gravel road where they've got me scouting for speeders. It's not a thrilling gig, but it pays the bills. This happened 2 days ago on a night that was pretty warm for once. It was my first night shift back after some time off. When I got in, my stand-in, Elton, the cop who'd covered for me while I was gone, told me he finally got what I meant about how spooky it could be. I chuckled, reassuring him I'd take over for a bit, and told him to bring something to do next time so he wouldn't dwell on it too much. If anyone knows what it's like switching from day shifts to nights, it's me, so I tried to put him at ease. After all, if he started picking up more shifts, I wouldn't have to sit in the dark as often. He handed me the keys, and I figured since this was the only night shift I was scheduled for that week, why not make it a little more bearable? I decided to invite him along. He could either sit at the desk all night in a dim station with just one other guy or hang out and shoot the shit in the patrol car. Honestly, I didn't think the glaring white walls of the station were much better than the darkness, and I guess he agreed because he took the offer pretty quick. We parked at one of the designated hideouts and settled in, watching some shitty horror movies and cracking open a couple of beers. Sure, we probably shouldn't have, but who's going to bust us for it? We're not lightweights either. It'd take more than a few cans to get us buzzed. We didn't expect to move much anyway until the company phone rang. I sighed, rubbed my eyes, and picked it up. It was 3 a.m., so at least we'd made it halfway through the shift before anything happened. I heard giggling on the other end, right away. I said hello a couple of times, and it was about to hang up when a voice came through. It was Soren, the only officer on duty at the station that night, manning the phones. Usually, he's as monotone as a bored robot, so hearing him laugh was already weird. "Hey Torin, how's it going?" "Can't complain," I said. "Just living the high life out here with Elton. What's up?" "You won't believe this shit," he said. "I got an emergency call from the old AMK factory off Cabin Road. That place doesn't have power or a phone line, which is why I'm cracking up. The caller said they broke in to steal some equipment and now they're somehow stuck inside." The patrol car went quiet for a second. Elton and I slowly turned to look at each other, then burst out laughing at almost the same time. "You're shitting me," I said. "I'm dead serious," Soren replied. "When I got the call, I nearly pissed myself trying not to laugh. Poor bastard." "I'm about to piss myself right now," I said, laughing. "Fuck, I think Elton already did." Elton smirked and punched my shoulder as Soren started talking again. "Anyway, do me a favor and go get this guy out of there. Up to you if you want to arrest him for trespassing or not. He's already had a shitty night. Oh, and he's got a speeding ticket to his name too." "I don't know if I can keep a straight face anymore," I said. "Call me back if you need backup, all right?" "I'd have to call the pinhole station if you do," Soren said. "They're on patrol this week, so I'm sure they've got a couple guys free. Sounds good?" "Yeah, Soren, we'll keep you posted," I said. I hung up, flipped on the cruiser's lights, cutting through the dark, and we peeled out onto the road, making sure not to clip any deer on the way. It was only about a 10-minute drive, but you never know. We pulled into the overgrown entrance of the building, brambles snagging everywhere, and I hopped out to unhook the rusty chain blocking the path. The place had been abandoned for over a decade after AMK moved its drilling operations north, taking half the town's population with it. Now it's just a hangout for local teens, judging by the graffiti sprayed along both sides of the cruiser. We stepped out, flicked on our flashlights, and started looking for a way in. Elton was clearly on edge, probably because he didn't even know this place existed. He's pretty new to the area, and I'm fairly sure this was his first time out of the car on a night shift, though I didn't ask. He circled around to the left side of the building while I went right, both of us searching for a rusted door or a busted window. I was peeling raspberry branches off my shorts when I heard Elton start yelling. I bolted around to his side, hand on my holster, ready for the worst. Was this a trap? Maybe the guy we were here for was some psycho looking to mess with us. Or worse. I rounded the corner fast, swinging my flashlight ahead, expecting something awful. The beam caught Elton giggling. I was confused as hell and asked if he was okay. He turned to me with the widest grin I'd ever seen on him. "I totally get you now," he said. I was relieved nothing was actually wrong, but mostly pissed he'd done that to me. It was nearly 4 a.m. for Christ's sake, and we were chasing some idiot around an abandoned warehouse. For a second, I'd thought he was under attack. That'd be a hell of a story when I got past him. I could tell he saw I was mad because his face dropped and he started apologizing, saying he was just trying to lighten the mood. I took a deep breath and gave him a small smile. I told him I'd get him back for it sometime and to just focus on getting inside for now. We found a broken window we figured the guy had climbed through and shone our flashlights inside to make sure we wouldn't step on nails or anything as we climbed in. I radioed Soren, asking him to call a couple more cops out here just in case something was off. After that stunt Elton pulled, I was worried something bad might actually happen, so better safe than sorry. The power was still out in there, looking. Back, I don't know why I bothered checking, so it looked like we'd be working by flashlight. We called out a few times into the darkness to see if we'd get a response, but nothing. We moved past old drilling machines or presses, our boots clanking on the concrete floor. After searching most of the rooms, we reached a hallway at the far back of the factory. I knew the place pretty well since I'd been called out here during the day a few years back to break up some drunk teens who'd snuck in, but it was a whole different beast at night. The fact that the hallway split into 3 branches right away didn't help either. This is where we made our first mistake, and it was a dumb one. We decided to split up. I know. That's how horror movies start and how characters die. We were both tired and our energy drinks were wearing off. We agreed to keep our radios on and check in if either of us found the guy. By then, I figured he'd found a way out and bolted into the woods, scared of getting caught. But we still had to sweep the place just in case. I wasn't planning to arrest him. I figured he'd had a bad enough night already, and the old equipment he was trying to haul off wasn't useful to anyone anymore. I'd just give him a warning after scaring him a bit, though I was starting to change my mind. I didn't want to have to search half this damn place, especially since there were 3 floors of rooms here. It didn't help that the building was split into 2 unconnected sides, so if one of us found something, the other would have to hoof it over. I was starting to see why this place got shut down. Every time I passed a room, I'd shine my flashlight in and call out. Judging by Elton's voice over the radio, we had a similar system going. I hit the first room, then the second floor. He was up on the third, so I warned him to take it slow, just to make sure every room was totally clear. I was met with dead silence, and I called again. Still nothing. "Hey, Torin, I see something," Elton said over the radio. "What is it?" "Down the hall from me, there's a hand sticking out of a doorway." I froze mid-step. What do you mean, a hand? It's waving a finger at me. I'm heading over. Don't go near it, don't fucking do that, I said, starting toward the stairs, admittedly slower than I should have. A chill ran through me, but logic told me someone was stuck and signaling Elton for help. As I hit the first floor of the other side of the building, he started yelling over the radio for me to move, and that's when I really started listening. As I got closer to that building's entrance, my radio crackled again. Torin. What? The fuck? There's a face. Someone's staring at me. I didn't answer. I just sprinted toward the hallway's exit door, grabbed the handle, and shoved. It wouldn't budge. I slammed my shoulder into it, yelling Elton's name. Behind the door, I heard a faint scream. The door finally gave, and I bolted up the dark stairs, pulling my gun from its holster. Whatever was happening up there wasn't good. I reached the third-floor entrance, and once again the door was locked. I rammed my shoulder into it again, calling his name, but there was no response. No screams. Just silence. I pulled my pistol and unloaded nearly a full clip into the lock. The door still wouldn't move. Something was blocking it from the other side. I hit it so hard that stuff started flying off my belt. My knife, then my taser, then my flashlight. I stopped for a second to grab it, but it kept rolling until it hit the edge of the stairs and dropped. I couldn't see shit anymore, but I didn't have time to go get it. The door was starting to give, and I had to get through. I kicked it so hard I thought I'd broken my ankle, but I didn't care. It finally dented enough for me to slip through. In the hallway, I called Elton's name again. As my eyes adjusted to the dark, I saw a light at the end. Not a flashlight, but a dimly lit room. Standing in the doorway was a silhouette. It had to be him. I called out again, but didn't step. Closer. The silence broke when a giggle started. Quiet enough that I couldn't tell if it was him, but it grew into loud laughter. He started moving, not leaving the doorway, just jerking side to side like he was dancing. I lowered my gun and called him again. I knew what was up. He was fucking with me. This was all just a prank to screw with me again. I was pissed as hell and started yelling down the hall. Are you fucking kidding me? I thought someone was attacking you, man. I fucking told you earlier not to mess around, and now you're giving me a heart attack doing this shit. What the fuck is wrong with you? I holstered my gun and turned back toward the door. I'd had enough for one night. I'd head outside, wait for backup to show up, and ride with them back to our station. When you're ready to stop fucking around, get the car and don't talk to me for a week. This is really fucked up, I said as I stormed out through the busted door, picking up all my gear. I climbed back through the window and stood in the darkness outside the factory, waiting for backup. Lucky for me, they were already on their way and got there about 5 minutes after I stepped out. I jumped into the back seat of their cruiser and buckled up. Whenever you're ready, you can take me back to the station, I said. 20 minutes down the main road, the cop driving turned back to look at me. Then he glanced at the wheel and pointed at the factory. You don't want to wait for your partner? Looks like he's up at that window. I rolled down my window and looked out. Sure enough, there was a faint glow coming from one of the windows, like a flashlight beam lighting up someone's silhouette. He'll bring our car back to the station, I said. I'm pissed at him right now, so we're square. With a nod, the cop shifted into reverse and we backed out onto the main road. When we got back to the precinct, I thanked him for the ride and hopped straight into my truck to head home. I was wiped out and didn't really care about waiting for Elton to bring the car in. He didn't show up for work yesterday, and he didn't bring the cruiser back either. We figured he was just sick and forgot to call in. Or maybe he was dreading facing me after his little prank backfired. Everyone I told the story to seemed to take my side. Maybe he knew I'd spread the word and was scared of getting chewed out. That was my theory yesterday, at least. He didn't show up today either, and people started getting a little worried. even me. We sent a couple of cops out to the factory to see if he'd left it in the cruiser or taken an Uber home and ditched it there. Sure enough, it was parked in the same spot. When they saw that, they called me in to help search the area. It was my day off, so I was annoyed, but I hoped he was okay, so I gave in. We searched the whole factory and found nothing until we hit that third-floor hallway we'd been in a few days back. I climbed the last set of stairs and saw one officer puking in the corner while the other covered his eyes in disgust. I pushed past them and stepped into the hall. The floor was stained with a trail of blood leading to the end, where Elton was hanging in the doorway. He'd been completely carved up, gut ripped open, eyes and tongue gone. Most striking were his arms and legs. The veins were practically torn out and twisted together so tight they formed a makeshift rope. Seeing it, I didn't puke right away like the other cop. I just stood there, totally stunned. But when I stepped into the room behind his body, above him, rigged to the doorway, was a makeshift pulley system. His veins had been threaded through it like he was a puppet. I used to be a pizza delivery driver. One night, while dropping off an order at a house, I heard something so unsettling it made me swear off that job for good. Trouble had a way of finding me ever since I was a kid, often dragging me into bad influences that fueled some truly shitty, reckless choices. My brushes with illegal antics usually flew under the law's radar. Countless close calls only fed my warped sense of invincibility. That is, until one night when me and the guys I called friends fucked up big time. The sky was a bruised purple, stabbed through with a million tiny diamonds as my buddies and I got buzzed on beer and the constant hum of weed. We were holed up in a neighbor's garage, gathered around a single flickering bulb dangling from the ceiling after sneaking in. The air hung thick with the metallic tang of oil and the distant drone of a fridge, thumping like a low heartbeat. We'd slipped through a gap in the rough wooden fence, its splinters scraping our skin, and sprawled out in a circle like we owned the place. My parents were out of town for the weekend, mistakenly thinking I was responsible enough to stay out of trouble. My friends and I lit up a fat joint, the harsh smoke clawing at my throat as I took a deep drag, feeling like some cartoon dragon puffing out a thick, swirling cloud that stagnated in the still air. I couldn't tell if it was the weed or just bad luck, but I lost my balance and stumbled back, knocking over a toolbox with a piercing crash. A puddle of solvent we hadn't noticed before spilled out, glinting ominously in the dim light. Metal tools clattered into it, and a spark flared up. In an instant, that tiny flame roared into a massive blaze. Panic spread faster than the fire, racing through the garage. My friends' terrified faces flashed past me as they bolted, leaving me alone with lungs burning for clean air. A desperate gasp got trapped in my smoke-filled chest. With a surge of adrenaline, I ignored the searing heat and flung the garage door open. There stood Mr. Gavin, my neighbor, his furious glare cutting through the haze in his ratty bathrobe. Without a word, he grabbed my collar and threw me onto the damp grass, then ran for a fire extinguisher, his face twisted with determination as he fought to save what was left of his burning garage. Mr. Gavin, still reeking of charred fabric clinging to his robe, barked into his phone, reporting the fire and our break-in. The wail of sirens grew louder in the distance, a sound that tightened the knot of dread in my gut. The cops showed up fast. My so-called friends, eager to save their own asses, wasted no time pointing the finger at me. Legally, things looked grim. The authorities, their faces shadowed under the flashing cruiser lights, labeled my accidental arson a felony. Intent didn't matter. The evidence of trespassing, the half-smoked joint, and the smoldering ruins of the garage painted a clear picture. Our mix of bad decisions, breaking in, getting high, and the fire, left no room for leniency in the law's eyes. The judge, a stern woman named Maris, sealed my fate 4 months in juvie. Those months turned into a forced stretch of soul-searching, a monotonous battle against regret within cold, sterile walls. The suffocating silence, broken only by the clang of metal doors and heavy footsteps, echoed my downward spiral, replacing the camaraderie I'd once craved. A month before finishing my sentence, the court let me out on probation, contingent on paying back the repair cost for Mr. Gavin's garage. Every hard-earned cent I made over the next year went toward that debt, a constant reminder carved in both cash and trust. The weight of my past clung to me like damp clothes as I pushed forward, paycheck by paycheck. The air at home was thick with unspoken disappointment. My mom sat beside me, her hands trembling slightly as she scrolled through a sea of job listings under the flickering glow of the screen. I knew she was hurting, but beneath her anger, I saw love, a silent plea for me to grasp how serious my screw-up was. My dad, ever practical, sat across from us, his usual cheerful face creased with a deep frown. Unlike Mom, his silence felt accusing, carrying a weight that spoke volumes. Nights passed, marked by the steady tap of the keyboard as we sifted through listings. Then we clicked on an ad from J&N that seemed promising. Pizza delivery driver wanted. It wasn't the dream job I'd hoped for, but it was a start. My parents sensed the shift too. They exchanged a look. Mom's face lit up with hope and Dad almost cracked a smile. Mom was a wizard with words, polishing my resume from a mess into something presentable. Dad, seasoned from years of interviews, coached me through the process, his tough questions a brutal but necessary rehearsal. In that moment, their unspoken support hit harder than any words could. A week later, I found myself outside Luigi's Pizzeria, its peeling sign hanging above the entrance. The air was rich with the classic scent of an old pizza joint, melted, cheese mingling with sizzling pepperoni. In one corner, 4 stacks of greasy boxes teetered against the wall, plastered with faded posters of cartoon chefs tossing toppings with over-the-top gusto. A gruff man emerged from the swinging kitchen door. Hardin, not the polite interviewer I'd pictured. His flour-dusted apron clung to him like a second skin, and his voice boomed with a roughness that could rival a foghorn. Desperation drowned out my initial nerves. I needed this chance. The interview was short and to the point. No digging into my past, no questions about the fire still smoldering in my mind. Instead, Hardin focused on the basics: age, driver's license, and the damn near impossible task of juggling a hot pizza with a flaky GPS. It wasn't much, but in that moment it felt like everything. This rough-around-the-edges guy with his flowery apron and blunt attitude handed me a lifeline out of the hole I'd dug myself into. The job itself wasn't a walk in the park, but it wasn't a disaster zone either. There were long stretches of downtime interrupted by occasional order rushes that left me breathless and sweaty. The base pay was a joke, barely enough for a week of ramen, but tips were my saving grace. Crisp bills stuffed into sweaty palms or rattling at the bottom of the delivery bag kept me going. Every penny went straight to Mr. Gavin, a nagging reminder of the debt hanging over me. But the real challenge wasn't the physical grind or the measly paycheck. It was the customers. On paper, the gig seemed simple. Deliver hot pizza, collect cash, smile politely. In reality, it was a different beast. Some folks were friendly enough, happy to see a pizza show up at their door. Others, though, let's just say they could test a saint's patience. A wrong turn or a slight delay could spark a verbal lashing that hit me hard enough to rattle my teeth. I'd weathered accusations of stealing soda with the fury of a wronged king, and even faced down a few punks demanding free pies for inconvenience, real or imagined. Those moments made me question humanity, wondering if kindness was some Extinct species. Late into a shift, the clock on the wall taunted me with its neon glow, teasing that midnight and freedom was close. I was about to shut off the radio for that blissful end-of-shift silence when Hardin's voice crackled through. "One more delivery," he announced. I swallowed a groan, threatening to turn into a full-blown rant. 2 steaming pizzas were shoved. Into my hands, the cardboard boxes radiating a comforting warmth that clashed with my dwindling patience. A greasy, sticky note slapped on top held the address, scrawled in jagged handwriting, and a phone number with more digits than seemed normal. A glance at the GPS confirmed my hunch. This drop-off was way outside our usual range, deep in the quiet countryside. With a helpless sigh, I punched the address in, muttering a prayer to the tech gods for a decent route. The screen blinked to life, chirping cheerfully about a shortcut down Creek Road, or some variation of that flickering name. It conjured images of a peaceful farmstead, maybe a couple of friendly cows on the other side of town. Streetlights gave way to a pitch-black blanket, dotted with the occasional twinkle of stars. Figuring out which turn was actually Creek Road became a guessing game. Thick foliage pressed in on both sides, rustling leaves playing a symphony of soft sounds. Each twist and turn made me wonder if I was heading the right way, or just lost with a car full of cooling pizzas. In a last-ditch effort, I pulled onto a gravel shoulder, headlights casting long, dancing shadows across the uneven ground. Grabbing the sticky note, I dialed the number. Silence stretched on, backed by the rhythmic chirping of crickets hiding in the roadside grass. Just as I was about to hang up, a raspy voice cut through. Deep and low, yet oddly laced with a gentle lilt. "Hello?" Relief crashed over me like a tidal wave. "Hey, this is your pizza guy," I blurted, my voice pitching higher than usual. "I'm having some trouble finding your place." Another beat of silence, then the man chuckled softly. "Don't worry, son," he drawled. "My driveway's easy to miss, looks more like a dirt path than anything else," he went on, painting a picture with his words. A big oak tree with a tire swing dangling from a low branch, a rusted mailbox shaped like a red pickup truck. With renewed hope, I hung up and gripped the wheel tighter. I eased into a narrow dirt trail, headlights piercing the dark like twin spotlights. Dust kicked up behind me, a hazy cloud briefly obscuring the path. After what felt like forever, but was probably just 30 seconds, a single-story house emerged from the shadows. A ranch-style place painted a warm yellow that seemed to glow faintly in the dark. A flickering lamp in the window cast a welcoming golden rectangle onto the porch swing. Clutching the 2 steaming pizzas, their boxes warm in my hands, I crunched up the gravel path to the front door. No doorbell greeted me, so I rapped my knuckles on the weathered wood. The sound echoed hollowly in the chilly night air. Muffled. Music, something old, maybe from the 1900s by the sound of it, filtered out from inside. Slow, deliberate footsteps shuffled toward the door, sending a shiver down my spine. The steps stopped abruptly. A pause, then the door creaked open, revealing only a patch of darkness with a man's head poking out from behind it. His face stayed shadowed, like he was using the door as a shield, keeping his body out of sight. Hey," I said, cutting through the sudden, thick silence. "Pizza delivery, right?" "Yeah, that's me," came the rumbling voice, unmistakable from the call. An awkward silence settled in again. The old raspy music a desperate distraction from the growing tension. "You got cash ready?" I blurted, trying to break it. "Yeah, hang on a sec," he muttered, his tone warm despite the weird strain, in the air. He shuffled back, the music briefly overtaken by the soft creak of wooden floors. A light breeze nudged the door wider, spilling light inside and giving me a glimpse of a cluttered living room. But that quick peek was drowned out by a stench that hit me like a brick to the face. An unmistakable sickly sweet rot that churned my stomach and stung my eyes. It was the smell of death, and it instantly overpowered the old tune humming from within and the man's friendly vibe. The moment stretched into a heavy, uneasy silence. I shifted my weight from one foot to the other, the crickets outside growing louder as no other sound broke through. It was ridiculous. This whole delivery was off. With a rising sense of dread, I knocked on the open door again. "Sir?" My voice sounded strained even to me. A muffled reply came from deeper in the house. "Can you come to the kitchen, please?" The request was so bizarre, so out of place, that I blinked, half convinced I'd misheard. "Can you say that again?" I asked, needing confirmation. "Can you come to the kitchen, please?" he repeated, his voice more insistent now, a hint of urgency creeping in that made my spine tingle. My gut twisted. That wasn't in the handbook. Hardin had drilled into us never to enter a customer's house for safety and liability reasons. But in that moment, clear judgment gave way to some fucked up sense of, what? Duty? Curiosity? Against the nine? Warning voices in my head, I shrugged half-heartedly and stepped inside. The old floorboards groaned under my weight like a reluctant spirit protesting. The house wasn't just old. It was a time capsule, every detail frozen in a bygone era. The narrow interior stretched out before me like a dim tunnel. A dark hallway branched off to the left and right like forgotten rooms in a maze. Faded wallpaper clung to the walls, flaunting swirling floral patterns in dusty pinks and dull golds. A design straight out of a 1930s dream, peeling at the corners. A tall grandfather clock stood like a sentinel, its ornate mahogany frame glinting faintly in the weak light spilling through the cracked door. Its stately presence was pierced by the rhythmic tick of its pendulum, a steady heartbeat in the quiet house. Next to it, an old-world record player spun to life, its needle whispering over a dusty vinyl. A haunting, melancholic melody drifted from the speaker, a forgotten song from a lost time. To my right, an open doorway offered a tantalizing peek into the kitchen. An old cast-iron stove, its black belly worn smooth to a dull gray from countless meals, stood proudly against the far wall. Light danced on its chipped enamel surface, hinting at a pot simmering on the burner. A porcelain sink, its once pristine white now yellowed and etched by years, sat beneath a small window framed by lace curtains more beige than white. The man's warm, slightly raspy voice called from somewhere in the kitchen, but I couldn't see him. As I turned my head left, a narrow hallway stretched out, lined with closed doors. At the far end, a flickering cassette glow cast an uneasy light, illuminating an old woman dancing in the corridor. She was stark naked, her back to me, swaying and moving slowly to the 1900s music spilling from the living room. She was feeling herself, not in some confident way, but literally running her hands over her body in this erratic, disturbing manner. Her movements were slow, almost dreamlike as she rocked to the tune, lost in her own world. I'd seen my share of weirdos as a delivery guy. A naked woman dancing to creepy music might sound funny to some, but what I saw went beyond humor. It was downright unsettling. Her movements clashed with the music, like she was in a trance. Dread coiled in my gut as I tore my eyes from the eerie sight in the hallway and nervously shifted my gaze to the kitchen. I caught a glimpse of the man, or at least what he let me see. He was peeking around the corner now, his face half hidden by the wall, his body still out of sight. One eye stared at me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. My mind went blank. All I could manage was a single desperate question spilling out in a choked whisper. "You got the money?" His response wasn't what I expected. Instead of words, a sound came from his shadowed form. A guttural, raspy chuckle that felt like it crawled up from somewhere deep underground. It wasn't laughter in any normal sense. It was a raw, chilling vibration that rattled my bones and made my hair stand on end. It was the sound of something primal, something lurking just beneath the surface of normalcy. Then, with a jarring abruptness, the horrible laugh cut off. "Get him, Mother!" The words exploded from his mouth, shattering the silence with a force that made me flinch. The sheer volume and raw aggression were a stark contrast to his earlier, calm, even tone, like a switch had flipped, revealing a rage simmering beneath the surface. My blood ran cold as the weight of his words sank in. From the hallway to my left, a sound ripped through the air, rapid footsteps closing in. I whipped my head around just in time to see the naked woman who'd been dancing moments before charging at me. Her speed defied her age, driven by a terrifying urgency. Pure panic surged through me, an adrenaline shot kicking me into gear without a wasted thought. I spun on my heel, the forgotten pizza boxes slipping from my hands with a dull thud. The door, my only way out, felt miles away. My legs pumped, driven by an instinct to flee that overpowered any shred of dignity. I flung the door open with a bang, the hinges groaning in protest, and launched myself through the threshold. When I reached the car, I fumbled with my keys for a split second, cursing my shaking hands. The door flew open, and I all but threw myself into the driver's seat, slamming it shut with another jarring crash. The engine roared to life, a sound sweeter than anything I'd ever heard. I stomped the gas and the car lurched forward, tires spitting gravel as it peeled out of the driveway. As I sped off, the house shrank in my rearview mirror. I couldn't resist one last glance back. Bathed in pale moonlight streaming through the open door, I saw them, the man and clearly his mother, both fully naked now. Their silhouettes were stark and unsteady in the dark interior. Their faces were cloaked in shadow, but the intensity of their stares seemed to pierce the distance, tracking me even as I put more space between us. Whatever was going on in that house wasn't normal. I couldn't shake the overwhelming feeling that their intentions weren't innocent and sure as hell weren't about pizza. I went back to work a few days later, that encounter still looping in my head. Telling my co-workers was a mistake. Most of them laughed, just like I figured they would. "Dude, you got chased by a naked old lady?" They jeered. Their laughter felt hollow and grating, buzzing in my ears like pissed-off bees. Frustrated and rattled, I stormed into Hardin's office and told him I was never coming back. He knew about my court-mandated deal and tried to talk me into staying. "If you don't have a job to keep up with the neighbors' payments, you'll end up back in juvie," he warned. The thought of detention didn't carry the weight it once did, not compared to what I'd seen in that house. I didn't care. I blurted out that I'd rather go back than keep working here. 4 weeks later, I landed a gig at a local diner. The pay was decent, but after court fees and the mandatory deal to repay Mr. Gavin's garage, every cent mattered. One night, during a late shift at the diner, I was caught in the familiar rhythm, the sizzle of burgers on the grill, the dance of waitstaff weaving through customers, the clatter of cutlery and plates from the kitchen. As I wiped down a table smeared with ketchup and abandoned fries, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out and answered with a curious, "Hello?" Silence, then a gasping breath filled the line, shallow and tense. Normally I'd have hung up, but something felt vaguely familiar. Then it hit me like a ton of bricks. That old, raspy 1900s tune playing faintly in the background was the exact same song I'd heard in that house. I agreed to check on my neighbor's cat while she was away on vacation. And what I ran into scared me so bad I bolted out of there in a panic. My friend Sigrid and I had known each other since high school. We ended up at the same college, moved to the same neighborhood, and even started working at the same place. All pure coincidence, but it let us get tight even though we didn't have much in common beyond our overlapping lives. About 4 years ago, she switched jobs first. We still grabbed lunch regularly for a while, but then I moved out of the neighborhood into a house in the suburbs. So without daily chats at work or living close by, we just drifted apart. For a couple of years, we only talked on birthdays and big holidays, wishing each other well, catching up on random life updates, that sort of thing. This year on my birthday, she sent me a letter saying she'd bought a house again, and by some fluke, it was just 10 minutes from where I'd moved. She invited me to her housewarming party and texted me after to thank me for coming. A few days later, she messaged again, and soon we were back in touch. This was mid-June, and with summer winding down, we didn't get a chance to hang out again before I left for a trip. We texted daily though. Almost every day she'd tell me about her cat and send me pics. It was a gorgeous rescue, all black except for white paws that looked like little boots, so Sigrid named her Pippa. From the photos and videos, Pippa seemed adorable, cute and sweet as hell, so when I got back from my trip, I didn't think twice about agreeing to swing by Sigrid's place every evening to look after her while she was gone for a week. I even offered to take Pippa to my place, but since I've got a dog and Sigrid wasn't sure how Pippa would handle it, we settled on me stopping by each night for a few hours depending on my schedule. Her flight left before mine landed, so we couldn't meet up for her to hand me the keys. Instead, she gave me the code to her garage door. Easy access that way. The gig was straightforward. Check Pippa's dry food, give her some wet food every night, swap out her water, and clean the litter box. I'd also hang out for an hour or so, cuddling or playing with her. Simple and sweet, right? Wrong. The first night went fine. I got there around 8:30, dinner time, and Pippa wolfed down her wet food like a champ. We played with her favorite toy afterward. What's your favorite toy, Pippa, huh? I asked playfully. She locked eyes with me, darted into the bedroom, and came back with an orange plastic mouse. I was blown away by how she seemed to get my question, but I figured Sigrid talked to her all the time and favorite toy must have clicked with that specific mouse after a few rounds. I refilled her water and dry food, scooped the litter, then flopped onto the couch to read a bit. Pippa hopped up and started kneading the blanket I'd draped over myself, making biscuits like a pro. I snapped some pics and sent them to Sigrid, who was thrilled Pippa was getting all the ear scratches and sweet talk. She curled up on my stomach, purring herself to sleep. "Oof, Pippa, what's that smell?" I said, waving my hand to shoo away the stink. "Your asshole's fucking rank, girl. Not ladylike at all." She meowed back at me like she was apologizing or arguing, then got up and wandered off. "Pippa, I didn't mean it," I called after her. I set my book down and checked the time. Past 11 p.m. Pretty late, I thought. I gathered my stuff, texted Sigrid I was heading out, made sure the garage door shut properly, and hit the road. The next night was smooth sailing, same routine. A little food, some playtime, and chilling on the couch. Pippa sprawled across my chest again, and once more, that god-awful stench hit me. "What the hell is this smell?" I groaned, grabbing her and pulling her closer to sniff out where it was coming from. I wasn't sure if cats needed their anal glands checked like dogs, but I guessed this might be it. Pippa, slippery as any cat, darted off again, meowing at me from across the room. "All right, lady, I've got to go anyway," I said. The third night was when shit got weird. That awful smell slammed into me the second I walked in. Oh fuck, I muttered, and fired off a quick text to Sigrid to see if it was cool to cut back on the wet food. It reeked like sulfur, the kind my French bulldog let loose after eating cheese. Something's gotta be up with this poor cat's stomach, I argued in the message. She asked about the litter box poop, and sure enough, it was rank. She suggested cutting the portions, but wasn't too worried. Apparently Pippa could get gassy when stressed, so I cracked a window to air things out, making sure Pippa didn't make a break for it, then went through the usual: water, dry food top off, and a trip to the couch. This time Pippa didn't join me. Instead, she stood across the room staring at me, those sharp green eyes locked on, unblinking. She just stared the whole time I was there. It freaked me out enough to cut the night short. At 10:05, I said goodbye and bailed. All the way home, I kept thinking about how eerie it felt with Pippa watching me in the dark, but I couldn't figure out how to tell Sigrid her cat was creepy as hell without sounding like a dick to a pet owner. The next night I showed up and the place was pitch black. I always left with the stairwell light on from the garage to upstairs, plus the hallway light, but now, nothing. I thought maybe the breaker tripped, but when I flipped a switch, it worked fine. Odd, I thought, not dwelling on it too much. I headed upstairs to handle the cat stuff and opened a window again since the sulfur stink lingered. This time, Pippa didn't greet me at the door. She was on the far side of the house, at the base of the attic stairs. "Pippa, dinner time," I called, but she just stared back. "Come here, Pippa," I tried again, stepping toward her. As I got closer, she bolted up to the attic. "Fine, you know where your food is, you'll find me on the couch," I shouted from the bottom of the stairs. The house felt weirdly cold too. I checked the thermostat. Sure enough, it had dropped a few degrees. I texted Sigrid, who just said not to worry about it. I shrugged and went to the bedroom to rummage for a thicker blanket or quilt from her closet. While I was poking around, I heard something right above me. My heart stopped. It sounded like tiny footsteps. Then I remembered Pippa was probably up in the attic, maybe chasing a mouse or two. I knew cats were supposed to be quiet and sneaky, but Pippa was a bit chunky, and modern cats aren't as stealthy as they used to be, I guessed. After finding a decent quilt, I made myself a mug of hot tea and curled up with my book on the couch. 20 minutes later, Pippa came back downstairs and paced around the couch. "Come on, Goose, I'm sorry I called you a stinky shit," I said, looking at her. Like she'd been waiting for it, she jumped up, and I noticed something in her. "Mother, what's that, Pippa?" I asked, leaning closer. "What have you got there?" Every cat owner knows what's coming next, but I didn't expect Pippa to inch toward me and drop a dead mouse into my hand when I reached out. At first I didn't register what it was, but the second I did, I screamed bloody murder and flinched so hard the mouse flew across the room. And get this, the little fucker wasn't dead, just stunned. The moment it hit the floor, it snapped awake and scurried off. Too fast for Pippa to catch this time. It must have ducked into some mouse hole in the kitchen and got away. At least, now I knew there was a nest somewhere. I texted Sigrid about the whole thing, suggesting she might want to find and plug that hole. She replied, telling me not to sweat it. If she wasn't worried, I sure as hell wasn't going to be. Meanwhile, Pippa finished her wet food, and I went back to my book. After dinner, she climbed onto the couch and curled up by my feet. That stench didn't leave her. 3 more days until Sigrid got back. "Poor thing, this must be stressing you out, making you all gassy," I said. She turned and fixed me with those piercing green eyes. Right then, I heard footsteps above us again. Pippa flinched, her pupils dilating so wide the green was just a thin outline around the black. Those damn mice, I told myself, but I knew better. Those steps were too heavy for mice. A sudden urge to get the hell out hit me hard. I checked the time. Shit, almost midnight. Pippa, I've got to get out of here, I said, grabbing my stuff in a rush. As I headed for the garage stairs, I could hear the footsteps trailing me from above. I bolted for the door, relief flooding me as I stepped outside. The next night I debated hard about going back, but ditching felt unfair to both the cat and Sigrid, who I'd promised. So I compromised with myself, feed the cat, scoop the litter, change the water, and get out. Then on Saturday, I could go during the day, maybe hang out longer to make up for it and feel less creeped out. That's what I did, or tried to, at least. I got there, and Pippa was waiting like the first few nights. "Hey, little one," I said as she rubbed against my legs and purred. "Sorry, this is gonna be quick tonight." The footsteps started early this time. In, feed the cat, out, I muttered to myself. Thump, thump, thump. I could hear them overhead as I prepped Pippa's dinner, my hands shaking, pulse racing. "Here you go," I said, setting the bowl down, trying my damnedest to ignore whatever was up there. I hit the bathroom to clean the litter, and the footsteps followed me. Thump, thump, thump. I went back to the kitchen to check if Pippa was done and swap the water, but this time the steps didn't follow. They seemed to head the other way, toward the stairs. This wasn't right. My brain screamed to run for the garage, but my gut said find Salt. Thump, thump. I could hear them getting farther. I started opening cabinets, hunting for anything. Table salt, a shaker, a bag of it, whatever. I found a Himalayan salt grinder and started cranking it over the counter. "God, I hope this works," I muttered. The thumping stopped. I stopped grinding too, holding my breath to keep the stillness intact. Creak, creak. I froze. Something was coming down the stairs, no question. I grabbed whatever salt I could grind into my palm and ran for the stairs, eyes half shut. As I reached the door, fumbling for the knob between squints, I noticed the lights flickering hard. The footsteps were in the hallway behind me now. I started praying, tossing salt over my shoulder. I realized I didn't know the English "our" Father by heart and started crying as I scrambled to recall it. Then I switched to Latin, picked it up in high school, and somehow it came back naturally. "Pater noster qui es in caelis," thump. "Sanctificetur nomen tuum," thump. "Adveniat regnum tuum," thump. I could hear them speeding up, running toward me. "Panem nostrum," thump, thump. "Et dimite nobis," thump, thump. And then they stopped right behind me. For a split second I felt cold breath on my neck and heard a faint whisper I couldn't make out, plus a witch-like cackle in the distance. "Libera nos a malo, amen," I yelled, finishing the prayer and throwing all the salt I had left behind me. The whispering stopped. The footsteps stopped. The cackling stopped. The house settled back into its natural quiet, with the occasional car passing outside, headlights softly lighting the room. I was sure whatever was behind me was gone, but I didn't turn around. I didn't look. I opened the door to the basement and garage, stumbled down the stairs, punched the garage opener, and got out. Once outside, I ran across the street. I'd planned to sprint all the way home, but I glanced over my shoulder at the house. It looked fine, dark, quiet. I started sobbing as I called Sigrid. She didn't pick up. I texted her. Nothing. I stopped going to the house. Pippa would be alone for 2 days at that point, and I'd left her plenty of dry food. I was too scared of what might happen next. I'd explain it all to Sigrid, and if she didn't get it, tough shit. I knew she'd land Sunday at 7:00 p.m., so I went to the airport and waited. "What are you doing here?" she said as she came through the gate. Thought you might need a ride. Plus, I need to tell you something," I replied. I spilled the whole story, showed her the pics I'd taken, even the ones I'd sent her before. She listened quietly, and when I finished, she paused, looked me in the eye, and grabbed my hand. "Do you think I could stay with you tonight?" she asked softly. "What?" I said, genuinely confused. "Don't you want to check on your cat?" "Andy, those pics are undeniably from my house," she said, pulling out her phone. "But I don't have a cat." Our last chat on her phone was her thanking me for the housewarming months ago. The world of TikTok, Snapchat, and whatever newfangled social media platforms my 11-year-old daughter is glued to has always struck me as childish and not particularly interesting. But when online news outlets like Yahoo and MSN started picking up stories from TikTok, I thought, why not? And decided to at least give it a shot. I was genuinely surprised to find that TikTok had a ton of topics. People posting about everything from cats to the military to true crime videos. Some of the posts I came across were juvenile, but eventually TikTok filtered those out and honed in on stuff a 38-year-old guy like me enjoys, like true crime mysteries. I love watching videos about people who vanish without a trace or blurry footage of unidentified suspects who were never caught. Since my daughter left a few hours ago, about a week back, for a weekend Girl Scout camping trip, I decided to dive into TikTok. The former Scout leader, Sarah, had been diagnosed with cancer, so she'd had to retire, sadly. Luckily, another mom stepped up to take over as the new leader alongside my now estranged wife, Laura, who's still trying to find herself. I'm glad my daughter Emily has something to do this weekend instead of just moping around the house bored out of her mind. The new leader, Diane, kindly picked up Emily along with her daughter Sophie and another girl, Lily, and drove them to the campsite in the Poconos. Diane sold me on her years of scouting experience, so I figured I'd do nothing more than kick back and relax this weekend. I started swiping through TikTok videos and found most of the crime-related posts I'd seen before, so I decided to branch out beyond the accounts I was following to see what else was new on TikTok. One post popped up and grabbed my attention. It was about a tragic Girl Scout camping trip posted by serial killer Blossoms. I didn't really want to watch the video because I didn't want to get paranoid and start comparing it to the possibility of something similar happening to Emily on her current trip. But whoever came up with the phrase "curiosity killed the cat" was probably thinking of some dumbass like me. I clicked on part 1 of the video posted 5 days ago, which showed the outside of a small yellow school bus with no signage. The creator then showed the inside of the bus. It looked like your typical small bus with about 6 rows of seats. The filmmaker pointed out several cameras mounted throughout the bus. I wasn't sure what the point of this first part was. I didn't know if the bus was part of a crime that happened in the past or just some tricked-out recreational RV. I was intrigued but hesitant, though I clicked on part 2 anyway. This time, the bus was moving, and I could see kids in the back. The camera was positioned near the driver, and I couldn't make out much beyond the fact that there were about 3 kids sitting on the bus. Then just a few seconds before the TikTok time limit hit, a different angle appeared. As I sat on my living room couch, I started to make out the kids' faces. They looked like middle school-aged girls. Something inside me urged me to keep watching. The video had been posted about 3 hours ago, and seeing girls around my daughter's age usually stirs up some empathy in me. Whatever was going to happen in this TikTok series clearly wasn't good, and I'd never want anything bad to happen to my daughter or anyone else's kid. But this time, my brain couldn't process what I was seeing over a mental hurdle because one of the girls looked exactly like Emily. Still, I didn't want to commit to that theory, so I replayed part 2. Unfortunately, I couldn't fast forward the video, so I had to wait through the final seconds. While waiting, my mind raced through what ifs, the biggest being, What if that girl really is my daughter? As the video neared its end and zoomed in on the girls, my worst nightmare came true. I screenshotted the video. My daughter had left wearing a Niagara Falls souvenir hoodie she'd bought a few months ago. The other two girls looked like Lily and made me wonder why my daughter was on a bus instead of Diane's car. And why was someone filming those two girls? I quickly clicked on part 3 of the series posted 2 hours ago. This video showed the 3 girls still sitting on the bus, while 2 other girls sat at opposite ends of the aisle in the back row. My daughter was seated right in front of them. I could tell from her expression that something was wrong. Emily wasn't crying, but she looked confused and scared, while Sophie and Lily wore the same terrified expressions. I started to panic as I grabbed my phone and tried calling Diane. "We're sorry, the phone you are trying to reach is no longer in service. Goodbye." "What the hell was that?" I muttered in a confused tone. Then I tried calling Emily's phone, and it went straight to voicemail. I sank deeper into this nightmare as I frantically tried to find Lily's mom's number. Emily's mom, Laura, used to handle all the Girl Scout stuff, so I was short on contact info. Thankfully, I could access Laura's email account, where I searched for Girl Scout names and numbers. I found a name, Karen, along with her mom's number, Michelle, so I quickly dialed it. "Hello? Michelle, hi. This is Jack, Emily's dad. Do you know if Diane took the girls to the camping trip on a small yellow bus?" "No, Diane picked up Lily in a blue Mercury Sable. Why do you think they're on a bus?" "Listen, are you on your cell right now? I'm going to send you a TikTok video. Please watch it and call me back right away." "Sure, send the video." As I sent it, I didn't know what my next move would be, but calling 911 was definitely in the near future. Within a few minutes, I got a call back from Michelle. "Jack, what the hell is going on? Why is someone filming our daughters?" Michelle said in a rushed, panicked voice. "I don't know, but I've got a bad feeling about this. Jack, have you called your sister Diane? Diane's my sister?" "She's not my sister, she's Sophie's mom." "Jack, that woman, Diane, told me she was your sister when I met her before the camping trip. She said she was Sophie's mom." "Oh my God, that woman isn't Sophie's mom," Michelle said, her voice thick with confusion. "Holy shit, who the hell is this psycho?" "You know, it's Emily's mom, Laura, who usually does all the Girl Scout meetings, so I don't know all the parents. What do we do?" "I'm calling the cops," I said. "Okay, and I'll call Sophie's mom." I'd never called 911 before, and I was already nervous as hell, so dialing 911 made it even worse. 911, what's your emergency?" "My daughter went camping with a Girl Scout troop with 2 other girls and a woman named Diane, who seems to have lied about who she is." "Okay, so what's the emergency?" I stumbled across a TikTok video of someone posting about 3 girls on a small bus, not the blue Mercury Sable Diane picked them up in. "Okay, so how old are the girls, and what are they doing in the TikTok post?" "They're about 11 and they look really nervous and scared." "Okay, so they might just be nervous about being away from home, I suppose." "Maybe. But this woman Diane lied to me and said she was Sophie's mom, which she's not. She told another mom she was my sister, which is obviously bullshit." "All right, sir. I'll send an officer to your house since there are kids involved. But we're having a really busy night with a lot going on, so it might take a while for someone to get to you." "Wait, why?" I shot back. "Look, sir, you haven't told me anything that makes it sound like your daughter or the other girls are being harmed, so we have to prioritize our other available officers. Listen, I didn't give this woman permission to film my kid, and I'm damn sure these girls have been kidnapped, and I don't know where they're headed," I said, my voice boiling with anger. "Sir, I've got a daughter in Girl Scouts myself, and I've personally experienced leaders dealing with parents where sometimes things get lost in translation. So I'm not gonna rush to judgment, but all you've got is your daughter on a TikTok video sitting on a bus to a girl scout camping trip where she'd understandably be nervous. Listen, my address is 664 Mockingbird Lane. Hurry up and send someone. I barked, hanging up. The video cameras on the bus were angled so viewers couldn't see outside, so I didn't even know if they were headed to the Poconos. It was pretty dark out, which made me even more anxious. That sinking feeling of seeing my daughter in danger hit hard. I checked to see if part 4 had been posted yet. It had, so I clicked on it. Once again, the girls were being filmed, just sitting on the bus. The creepy part was that none of them were talking to each other. All 3 looked completely petrified, doing nothing but staring straight ahead. The girls reminded me of war videos I'd seen about D-Day, and how my daughter had that exact same grim look as the soldiers sitting on transport boats, waiting to storm heavily guarded beaches. The video was posted less than an hour ago, and it was darker than the others, so I could tell it was filmed about an hour back. My phone buzzed. Michelle was calling. Hey, Michelle. Listen, Jack, I called 911 and they're sending someone, but apparently they've got more pressing issues. More pressing issues? What the fuck is more pressing than 3 girls being kidnapped? The 911 operator thinks no crime has necessarily happened, or that it's an emergency. She thinks the girls might just look nervous because they're scared about whatever's going on at the camping trip and being away from their parents. Then who gave Diane permission to film my daughter and post it on TikTok? And who is Diane, and why is she using Serial Killer Blossoms as her username? You know, I was so pissed at the 911 operator I didn't even mention her username, but I doubt that would have made a difference. Serial Killer Blossoms is a new account and has only posted 4 videos so far. Not too many people have seen them, which is good because I don't want them taken down for violating TikTok policy. Jack, I really don't have a good feeling about this. Should I drive to the Poconos to the Red Squirrel campsite? Problem is you could, but I'm not sure the bus is headed to the campsite or even the Poconos. The campsite's less than 2 hours away, so they should have been there by now. So what do we do? Michelle asked, sobbing over the phone. Who the hell is this Diane? I said. I don't really know. When was Sarah diagnosed with cancer? Her story was plastered all over Facebook, and the fire department even held a fundraiser dinner to cover her medical costs. So maybe she's just some random psycho who stumbled across Sarah's story and thought this was her chance to kidnap some kids. What's her motive? Is she trying to get TikTok famous? TikTok famous for kidnapping kids and taking them camping? Michelle said, still crying. That's when I realized how naive Michelle's thinking was. I guess she hadn't seen the countless videos about the horrors the world has to offer. Like the idea that there are killers who murder just for sick thrills. Like that creepy photo of notorious serial killer John Wayne Gacy dressed as a clown at a kids show. Michelle didn't clock the fact that the hashtags Naster serial killer and Naster crime video were used in the video posts, which is why they showed up in my video feed. If I thought this caroler was just filming them going camping, I'd probably be mildly annoyed, but nothing about her post suggested her future actions were harmless. While I was on the phone with Michelle, I saw part 5 had been posted. Listen, Michelle, part 5 just went up, so I'm going to hang up and watch it. I pray the girls are okay. Try to find any info you can about this Diane woman. Bye. I didn't really want to play Dr. Phil with Michelle because I knew my daughter's fate was in my hands with those videos. I clicked on part 5. Beyond the light from the video camera, I could tell the area panning around was pitch black, just a thick forest of trees. I hadn't seen the girls yet, so my heart was pounding twice as fast. The camera finally showed a makeshift campsite with a small fire pit burning. Based on how remote the surroundings looked, I was certain this wasn't the Red Squirrel camp. Probably some super isolated spot given the density of the woods. The camera turned its attention to the small fire pit and then to a little two-person tent. I could hear the filmmaker breathing heavily as she moved toward the tent. Every inch of my body was gripped with absolute terror because I didn't know what was inside that tent. Up to this point, I hadn't seen Emily or the other two girls. The tent slowly opened and I started hyperventilating to the point I could have seized up any second. When the tent opened, I let out a sigh of relief seeing the three girls sitting inside the cramped space. But then my heart sank when I saw the helpless expressions on their faces. I zeroed in on Emily. Her eyes were welling up with tears. She looked like she'd seen the underbelly of hell and was too terrified to move. The camera panned from left to right as I noticed the other two girls had the same petrified faces as Emily. Not a word was spoken in the video, and I felt rage and total helplessness as I screamed, "Don't you fucking hurt my daughter, you son of a bitch!" Then the video ended.